Welcome to English Easy Hub. Join us as we ignite the flames of your English learning journey together.
Please subscribe to watch and embark on your English learning journey. Don't miss out on the exciting content. In this dialogue, Andy seeks guidance from his professor on mastering silent English, a method focused on enhancing internal language processing skills without the need for vocalization. The conversation delves into various techniques such as thinking in English, visualization, mental sentence construction, shadowing, and cultural immersion. Andy's goal is to build fluency and confidence in English, even when not speaking it aloud.
Good morning, Professor. I've been thinking about improving my English skills, but I'm really interested in mastering silent English, or as some people call it, closed-mouth English. Could you help me understand what this concept truly entails?
Good morning, Andy. Silent English, or closed-mouth English, as you referred to it, is an intriguing concept. It's essentially about enhancing your internal language processing skills. Instead of focusing purely on speaking, this approach emphasizes mental engagement with the language, thinking in English, understanding context, and internalizing grammar and vocabulary. It's about being proficient in English even when you're not vocalizing it.
That sounds fascinating, Professor. So, does it mean I should practice thinking in English more often? How can I train my brain to think in English naturally, without translating from my native language?
Exactly, Andy. The first step is to immerse yourself in English as much as possible. You can start by surrounding yourself with English media, books, articles, movies, and podcasts. The key is to engage with these materials actively. Instead of just reading or listening, try to predict what might happen next, or mentally summarize what you've read. This will help your brain get used to processing information in English directly, rather than translating.
I see. So it's more about engaging with the material on a deeper level. But I often find myself reverting to my native language when I'm thinking about complex ideas or emotions. How can I overcome this habit?
That's a common challenge, Andy. One effective technique is to use visualization. When you encounter complex ideas, try to associate them with images or scenarios in your mind. Visual thinking can help bypass the need for translation. Additionally, try to develop a vocabulary that's emotionally resonant for you in English. Engage with literature, films, or songs that evoke strong emotions, and pay attention to how feelings are expressed. Over time, your brain will start to build those connections in English.
Visualization sounds like a powerful tool. I'll definitely try that. But what about grammar? Sometimes, I feel like I understand the rules when I'm studying them, but when I'm actually trying to use them, especially in my head, things get jumbled. Any advice on solidifying grammar knowledge internally?
Grammar can indeed be tricky. My advice is to practice what I call mental sentence construction. Throughout your day, challenge yourself to mentally construct sentences or even short paragraphs about what you're doing, seeing, or thinking. Start simple and gradually make your sentences more complex. This helps reinforce the grammatical structures in your mind. Additionally, reading extensively is crucial. The more you expose yourself to well-written English, the more intuitive grammar will become.
Mental sentence construction, I'll give that a shot. Now, when it comes to vocabulary, I've heard that passive vocabulary is quite large for most learners, but active vocabulary can be limited. How can I expand my active vocabulary so I can recall words more easily when I need them?
Great observation, Andy. Expanding active vocabulary is about regular usage. You might have come across many words in your readings or listenings that you understand but rarely use. To shift these into your active vocabulary, you need to use them regularly in context. Try writing short stories, keeping a journal, or even creating mental dialogues using these new words. The more you practice, the more accessible these words will become in your active mental lexicon.
That makes sense. So, it's not just about learning new words but making sure I use them. What about pronunciation? Even if I'm focusing on silent English, should I still be concerned with how words are pronounced?
Absolutely. Pronunciation is key to internalizing the language. Even though you're focusing on silent English, knowing the correct pronunciation helps with memory retention and comprehension. You can practice by listening to native speakers and repeating after them, even if it's just in your mind. Over time, you'll develop an instinct for the rhythm and flow of English, which will help when you do speak out loud.
I hadn't thought about the role of pronunciation in silent practice. I'll make sure to incorporate that. One last thing, Professor, what about writing? Should I be focusing on improving my writing skills as part of this silent English approach?
Writing is indeed a crucial part of this process. Writing helps solidify your thoughts in English, making the language more concrete in your mind. Try to write regularly, whether it's journaling, essay writing, or even composing emails. Focus on clarity and coherence. The act of organizing your thoughts in written form reinforces your mental structures in English, aiding both your silent and spoken language skills.
Thank you so much, Professor. This has been incredibly enlightening. I now realize that mastering silent English is a holistic process that involves reading, thinking, visualizing, and writing. I'm excited to start practicing these techniques.
You're welcome, Andy. Remember, language learning is a journey, and the more you immerse yourself in it, the more natural it will become. Keep practicing, and you'll find that your internal dialogue in English will grow stronger and more fluid over time.
Speaking of internal dialogue, I sometimes feel like my internal voice in English is much slower and less confident than in my native language. Is this something that can improve over time, or should I be actively working on it?
That's an excellent point, Andy. The speed and confidence of your internal dialogue in English will naturally improve as you continue practicing, but you can also take active steps to accelerate this process. One method is to engage in shadowing, where you listen to native speakers and try to mentally mimic their speech patterns and speed in real time. This not only improves your internal pace, but also your overall fluency.
Shadowing sounds like a useful exercise. I'll definitely incorporate that. I've also noticed that when I'm mentally rehearsing conversations in English, I tend to get stuck on certain phrases or ideas. How can I become more fluid in these mental rehearsals?
Getting stuck during mental rehearsals is normal, especially when you're dealing with a language that isn't your first. To become more fluid, try focusing on paraphrasing. If you hit a mental block with a particular phrase, challenge yourself to rephrase it in a different way. This not only helps you move past the block, but also expands your flexibility with the language.
Paraphrasing, interesting. I can see how that would help. What about when I'm trying to think in English about topics that are outside of my usual vocabulary, like technical subjects or abstract concepts? I often struggle to find the right words or even the right structure.
When dealing with technical or abstract subjects, it's essential to build up subject-specific vocabulary and familiarity with the discourse style. Start by reading or watching content in English that covers these areas. Pay close attention to how ideas are structured and explained. Practice summarizing these concepts in your own words, mentally or in writing. Over time, this will help you feel more comfortable and competent in those areas.
That makes a lot of sense. So, it's about building familiarity with the specific language used in those contexts. What if I want to develop a more nuanced understanding of idiomatic expressions or cultural references in English? These often trip me up when I'm trying to think or understand deeper meanings.
Idiomatic expressions and cultural references are indeed challenging, as they require a deeper understanding of the language and its cultural context. To get a better grasp, immerse yourself in cultural content, TV shows, movies, books, and even humor in English. Try to learn idioms in context rather than in isolation. You might also find it helpful to study the history or stories behind certain idioms, which can make them more memorable.
Cultural immersion seems like a fun way to learn, especially with things like humor. But humor can be difficult to understand in a second language. How can I get better at understanding and even thinking in English when it comes to jokes or wordplay?
Humor is indeed one of the more advanced aspects of language learning, as it often relies on wordplay, cultural references, and nuanced language. To improve, start by watching or reading simpler forms of humor, such as sitcoms or comic strips. As you become more comfortable, you can gradually move to more complex material. Also, don't be afraid to look up explanations or analyses of jokes you don't understand. Over time, you'll start to see patterns and develop a sense of humor in English.
That's really encouraging, Professor. I never thought about humor as something I could actively learn. One last question: how do I measure my progress with silent English? Since it's all happening in my mind, it's hard to gauge how much I'm improving.
Measuring progress in silent English can indeed be challenging because it's not as visible as spoken or written skills. However, you can set benchmarks for yourself. For example, pay attention to how often you think in English versus your native language, or how comfortable you feel when mentally processing complex ideas in English. You could also try timed mental exercises, like summarizing an article in your head or mentally debating a topic. Track your progress over time to see how much faster or more fluent you become.
Those are great suggestions, Professor. I'll start incorporating these techniques and keep track of my progress. Thank you again for all your insights. I feel much more confident about my journey with silent English now.
You're very welcome, Andy. Remember, language learning is an ongoing process, and the more you practice, the more natural it will feel. Stay curious, keep challenging yourself, and enjoy the process. I'm confident you'll make great strides.
The conversation highlights the importance of internalizing English through active mental engagement. By practicing techniques like mental rehearsals, paraphrasing, and cultural immersion, Andy can develop a more intuitive grasp of English, making it a natural part of his thought process. The professor emphasizes that language learning is a journey, where consistent practice and curiosity will lead to significant progress.
Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share to keep the English learning journey alive.